As a journalist, I often have to keep emotions out of my reporting. If I allowed my emotions to get the best of me, it would be impossible to hold it together. I would completely fall apart based on the horrific stories we report day after day. Journalists have to immerse ourselves in these stories. We have to keep going because there are so many atrocities in the United States and across the world. Occasionally, and I would say often actually, in 2020 especially, there are certain stories where that's impossible. This is one of those stories. I do not have the words to adequately describe how horrific this story is. The headline here reads, "Like an experimental concentration camp, whistleblower complaint alleges mass hysterectomies at ICE detention center." So obviously you know about the calls to defund ICE. You know about the calls to stop the horrific practice of keeping kids in cages, of separating families, of the horrible conditions that ICE detainees have to deal with, like sleeping, like food, the lack of food, like medicine, the lack of medicine, the lack of attention and care. There are so many horrible things going on at these ICE camps. Well, we have recently learned through a whistleblower of, I would say, even worse atrocities going on. Forced hysterectomies, eugenics. Our country has a long and sordid history of this, which I will go over. But first, I want to give you the details of this story in particular. I also want to make it clear that I'm going to stay on this story. Thank God a whistleblower has come forward on what is truly going on. Of course, ICE is now pushing back, but we have to look at the history. We have to look at the truths of the whistleblower and of the women, these ICE detainees who have gone through this. This first part that I'm going to dive into comes from the actual OIG report that was submitted. And this was posted by Law and Crime, and you can find it by searching for OIG complaint uploaded by Law and Crime on September 14th, 2020. So this is about the Irwin County Detention Center in Georgia. You can see all the people that this was submitted to. And it's regarding lack of medical care, unsafe work practices, and absence of adequate protection against COVID-19 for detained immigrants and employees alike at the Irwin County Detention Center. So, of course, even based on this whistleblower complaint, there are a lot of things that we could get into related to the horrible conditions surrounding COVID-19 and these ICE detainees. For this particular video, I'm going to focus on the forced hysterectomies and the eugenics that are going on. So this is how the portion about the hysterectomies starts in this OIG report. Detained immigrants and ICDC nurses report high rates of hysterectomies done to immigrant women. Several immigrant women have reported to Project South, Project South is who these complaints came to and who is kind of coordinating this, their concerns about how many women have received a hysterectomy while detained at ICDC. One woman told Project South in 2019 that Irwin sends many women to see a particular gynecologist outside the facility, but that some women did not trust him. She also stated that a lot of women here go through a hysterectomy at ICDC. More recently, a detained immigrant told Project South that she talked to 5 different women detained at ICDC between October and December 2019 who had a hysterectomy done. When she talked to them about the surgery, the women reacted confused when explaining why they had one done. The woman told Project South that it was as though the women were trying to tell themselves it's going to be okay. She further said, "When I met all these women who had had surgeries, I thought this was like an experimental concentration camp. It was like they're experimenting with our bodies." Ms. Wooten, who is the whistleblower, the nurse, also expressed concern regarding the high numbers of detained immigrant women at ICDC receiving hysterectomies. She stated that while some women have heavy menstruation or other severe issues that would require hysterectomy, everybody's uterus cannot be that bad, Ms. Wooten explained. Everybody he sees has a hysterectomy, just about everybody. He's even taken out the wrong ovary on a young lady, detained immigrant woman. She was supposed to get her left ovary removed because it had a cyst on the left ovary. He took out the right one. She was upset. She had to go back to take out the left, and she wound up with a total hysterectomy. She still wanted children. She has to go back home now and tell her husband that she can't bear kids. She said she was not all the way out under anesthesia and heard him, the doctor, tell the nurse that he took the wrong ovary. Ms. Wooten also stated that detained women expressed to her that they didn't fully understand why they had to get a hysterectomy. She said, "I've had several inmates tell me that they've been to see the doctor and they've had hysterectomies, and they don't know why they went or why they're going. And if the immigrants do understand what they're getting done, some of them a lot of times won't even go. They say they'll wait to get back to their country to go to the doctor." The rate at which the hysterectomies have occurred have been a red flag for Ms. Wooten and other nurses at ICDC. Ms. Wooten explained, "We've questioned among ourselves, like, goodness, he's taking everybody's stuff out. That's his specialty. He's the uterus collector. I know that's ugly. Is he collecting these things or something? Everybody he sees, he's taking all their uteruses out or he's taking their tubes out. What in the world?" Intertwined with the issue of the reported high rates of hysterectomies is the issue of proper informed consent. Regarding the hysterectomies, Ms. Wooten explained, "These immigrant women, I don't think they really, totally, all the way understand this is what's going to happen, depending on who explains it to them." Ms. Wooten stated that the sick call nurse tries to communicate with the detained immigrants and speaks Spanish to detained immigrants by simply Googling Spanish, or by asking another detained immigrant to help interpret, rather than using the language line as medical staff are supposed to. One detained immigrant reported to Project South that staff at ICDC and the doctor's office did not properly explain to her what procedure she was going to have done. She reported feeling scared and frustrated, saying it felt like they were trying to mess with my body. When she asked what was being done to her body, she was given 3 different responses by 3 different individuals. She was originally told by the doctor that she had an ovarian cyst and was going to have a small 20-minute procedure done, drilling 3 small holes in her stomach to drain the cyst. The officer who was transporting her to the hospital told her that she was receiving a hysterectomy to have her womb removed. When the hospital refused to operate on her because her COVID-19 test came back positive for antibodies, she was transferred back to ICDC, where the ICDC nurse said that the procedure she was going to have done entailed dilating her vagina and scraping tissue off. The nurse first told the detained immigrant she was going to get this procedure done because she had heavy bleeding, but then told her it was because she had a thick womb. The woman quickly responded that she never had heavy bleeding in her life and was never told by the doctor that she had a thick womb. Instead, she stated that the doctor had described an entirely different procedure that did not involve scraping her vagina. She stated, "I tried to explain to her that something isn't right. That procedure isn't for me." The nurse responded by getting angry and agitated and began yelling at her. She told Project South that seeing the nurse's nervous and angry response confirmed that something was not right. I highly recommend reading this entire OIG report. That is just one piece of I'll keep using the word atrocities. That is just one piece of the atrocities that are alleged to be to have been committed and are ongoing, allegedly again, by this whistleblower. You know, she has come out saying that these things are being done according to things she has seen and according to testimony of immigrant women who are being held by ICE. You know, this is part of the reason why so many activists and progressives call for abolishing ICE. One of many reasons. So, I'm not going to go through the entire law and crime piece because it is basically going over what I just went over. It is, editorializing the OIG complaint that I just went over. I think it goes to show you that women do need to be heard. Women do need to be listened to. And I point this out in particular because of the way that ICE is now pushing back. At first they wouldn't comment, but now they have commented. And they're trying to say that this is not happening. Here is what Law and Crime was able to get out of them. So this came on September 15th as an update. Medical Director of the ICE Health Service Corps, Dr. Ada Rivera, said in a statement obtained by Law and Crime that ICE vehemently disputes the implication that detainees are used for experimental medical procedures. They go on to say, ICE's mission is to protect the homeland and to swiftly and quickly remove people from the country. The health, welfare, and safety of ICE detainees is one of the agency's highest priorities. Any assertion or claim to the contrary is false and intentionally misleading, the statement said. Rivera continues saying that since 2018, only 2 individuals at Irwin County Detention Center were referred to certified credential medical professionals at gynecological and obstetrical health facilities for hysterectomies in compliance with National Commission or Correctional Health Care Standards. They go on to deny this, but to them I say, why put out this statement? Why not actually look into this if you're actually concerned? And I think the answer to that is they're not concerned. All they're concerned with at ICE is trying to cover this up, of trying to tell, Congress, don't look into this, look away, of trying to diminish, yet again, the voices of these detained women who are being forced or tricked into having hysterectomies. You can't tell me that those women that have spoken out are all lying about this. You can't tell me that the whistleblower, Wooten, has come forward risking her future career prospects based on a lie. That's not what's happening here. What's happening here is that ICE is corrupt. ICE is committing eugenics, which, once again, this country has a long and storied history of. So let's dive into some of the historical precedents in this country. This is out of The Cut. Reports of ICE's forced hysterectomies are nothing new in America. This came out on September 15th by Angelina Chapin. So some specific parts of this history that I've pulled out are as follows. And, this might make you feel as nauseous as I do. It's not an easy thing realizing that this is our history, of seeing all the historical precedent laid out all at once and knowing that it is still going on today. This isn't just something in the past. This isn't just something we can brush aside. This is still happening. So part of this history, as detailed by The Cut, from the early 20th century to the 1970s, up to 70,000 Americans, most of them women, were forcibly sterilized. Again, this is what is happening at the ICE detention center in Georgia. And it wouldn't surprise me if it were being done in other detention centers, in other ICE detention centers as well. They were deemed unfit to procreate because of eugenics, the concept that certain people are tainted by undesirable traits that should be bred out of future generations. Undesirable, of course, was a euphemism for immigrants and anyone non-white, poor, mentally ill, or who had disabilities. In some cases, it included women who were promiscuous. The belief that only white, privileged offspring were welcome in America led to federally funded sterilization programs in 32 states, and a landmark Supreme Court case from 1927 reaffirmed the idea that governments should control who gets to have kids. It goes on, some states had even created eugenics boards with committee members who would read petitions from government agencies or family members and order sterilizations. North Carolina's board was one of the most aggressive. The state performed surgeries on more than 7,600 people between the 1930s and 1970s, 65% of whom were black women. The racism in this cannot be denied. American politicians only distanced themselves from eugenics after the term was embraced by the Nazis. Hitler cited U.S. law as inspiration, but forced sterilizations continued with a rebranded logic. Folks, we live in a sick, sick society. During the same time that Roe v. Wade granted mostly white women more bodily autonomy in the 1970s, up to 50% of Native American women were forcibly sterilized by the U.S. government. Doctors from the Indian Health Service didn't believe these women were intelligent enough to use birth control, and doctors coerced them into signing consent forms or gave them misleading information. That is exactly what is alleged to be happening at this ICE detention center. Many drank themselves to death when they found out they had been sterilized. A high-profile case from the 1970s focused on two sisters from Alabama, 12 and 14, who were secretly sterilized by a federally funded clinic. Their mother, who was illiterate, had signed a form that she thought gave her daughters permission to give birth control. Hospitals in the South let medical students practice unnecessary hysterectomies on black women in what became known as Mississippi appendectomies, and a third of those sterilizations were done on girls under 18. The ultimate goal of eugenics is to keep immigrants out of the U.S. and to curb their ability to procreate within the country. It's no surprise that the worst offending state for forced sterilizations was California, a place with a large Latinx and Asian population, where roughly 20,000 people had operations that left them barren between 1909 and 1964. Over the next 10 years, hundreds of Mexican American women were sterilized under duress while giving birth at a county hospital in Los Angeles. In the documentary, I don't know how to pronounce this, excuse me. So in that documentary, the women say that nurses and doctors threatened to withhold painkillers or emergency cesarean sections, telling them that your baby could probably die if they didn't sign consent forms. They scrawled signatures in moments of confusion and desperation, only realizing after the fact that their reproductive rights were now gone. Between the 1930s and 1970s, roughly a third of Puerto Rico's population was sterilized, the highest rate in the world. And the procedure became so common that doctors referred to it simply as la operación. While most instances of forced sterilizations are now illegal, a Supreme Court ruling in the late 1970s said doctors had to fully inform patients of their rights and could not ask for consent during childbirth. The practice continues. It's most common for people who are incarcerated or detained, like the women who say they were coerced into hysterectomies while in ICE custody. Between 1997 and 2010, I'll read that again, between 1997 and 2010, 1,400 women in California prisons were given unwanted sterilizations. One doctor said it would save welfare money going towards unwanted children, even though the forced surgeries were officially banned in the state in 1979. And as recently as 2017, a Tennessee judge told repeat offenders that he would cut down their jail time if they volunteered to have surgeries or contraceptive implants that would stop them from procreating. I honestly do not have the words. I have the anger, and that's why I said I'm going to stay on this. I'm going to see if, as much as I can, if this is happening elsewhere, what is truly going on at this ICE facility in Georgia. Members of Congress like Pramila Jayapal, Ayanna Pressley are coming forward about this, but this should be headline news everywhere. Instead of that, relatively few outlets have reported on this in the mainstream media. And when they do, it's buried. It's not on the front page, or it's not above the fold, as we say. Why is this story not at the very, very top of everyone's radar? This is happening in America. Something that inspired Hitler has continued here in America in the year 2020. All because of racism, xenophobia. So I'm going to stay on this. I am completely disgusted and horrified, and I hope that maybe you can help spread the word about what's going on, because everybody needs to know about this. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel to hear our continued reporting. Please consider becoming a member of Status Coup to help us on our mission to do as much in-field reporting and investigative reporting as possible. We need to be on stories like this, and you joining as a member for as low as $5 a month helps make that happen. Go to statuscoup.com/join.